Jack immediately returns home, upon suspecting Tony's father is an imposter. Jack was abroad when he received the news that Tiffany had found her biological father. At first he was overjoyed for her, but that joy was quickly replaced by a sense of unease when his mother shared her doubts about the man. Jack's mother, with her life experience and sharp intuition, noticed too many inconsistencies in the man who claimed to be Tu Tien's father. His stories didn't add up. His demeanor became uneasy whenever the past was mentioned, and most suspicious of all, he kept delaying the DNA test whenever it was suggested. All of this made her deeply skeptical. When Jack heard his mother's concerns, he couldn't sit still. A wave of anxiety swept over him. He knew how much Tu Tien had longed to reunite with her father. If this was all a lie, the heartbreak she would suffer would be unimaginable. Without hesitation, Jack booked the earliest flight home. Throughout the long journey, his mind raced with endless possibilities. If the man truly was Tu Tien's father, then everything would be fine. But if he was an imposter, then what was his real intention? After 3 hours in the air, Jack finally landed. Without taking a break or wasting a single moment, he immediately caught a ride home, where his mother was anxiously waiting, worried sick about Tu Tien. As soon as he stepped through the door, he saw the contemplative look in his mother's eyes. No words were needed. He knew she had been thinking about this non-stop. He sat down across from her, his voice firm and serious. "Mom, I'm home now. Tell me everything in full detail." She let out a small sigh, relief flickering in her eyes, now that her son was finally back. But then her expression turned serious again, as she began recounting everything that had happened in the past few days. The more Jack listened to his mother, the deeper his doubts grew. Scattered details now pieced together into a picture, full of inconsistencies. He could not hesitate any longer. He needed to see Tu Tien immediately, and witness for himself whether this man was truly her biological father. Wasting no more time, Jack drove straight to the farm. By the time he arrived, the sky had darkened, and the setting sun cast a golden hue over the vast fields. As he stepped into the yard, he saw the man who claimed to be Tu Tien's father, sitting on the porch slowly sipping his drink. Inside the kitchen, Tu Tien was busy cooking, completely unaware that Jack had returned. The moment Jack appeared in the yard, the man flinched slightly. Was it the natural reaction of an elderly man, caught off guard, or was he hiding something? His eyes flickered with brief hesitation, but within seconds he regained his composure. Meanwhile, Tu Tien, upon hearing the familiar footsteps, turned around and froze. She could hardly believe her eyes. Jack was standing there right in front of her. After so many days apart, a sudden surge of joy filled her heart, and her eyes lit up with happiness. "Jackie, why are you here?" Jack looked at her with a gentle smile, but his mind was still preoccupied. He hadn't told her in advance that he was returning, because he feared that, if she unknowingly informed the man, he might have time to prepare. Jack wanted to arrive unexpectedly, to observe everything firsthand and uncover any clues before they could be concealed. Tonight he needed to uncover the truth. And the man standing before him, was he truly Tu Tien's father? Jack maintained a calm and tactful demeanor as he spoke, showing no signs of urgency or direct suspicion. With a warm smile, he inquired about the man's well-being, in a sincere manner, carefully concealing any weariness. "Tu Tien told me that you traveled a long way to find her. That must have been a joyous moment for you." The man nodded, exhaling softly, as if lost in his memories. "Yes, I've wished for this day for many years. Jack nodded along, guiding the conversation naturally. Then I suppose you must remember a lot about Tu Tien's childhood. What was she like as a little girl? The man hesitated slightly before forcing a small smile. Not quite a natural one. It's been so long I don't remember much. I just know she was a well-behaved child. But time has passed. I've grown old and many things have faded from memory. Jack furrowed his brow for a split second, but quickly masked his reaction. He nodded with an understanding expression. That's understandable, being apart for so many years. Memories tend to fade. But usually parents remember certain special things. Like when their child first learned to walk or talk. Or maybe their favorite food. The man lifted his cup of tea. His movements slightly uneasy. He let out an awkward chuckle and avoided the question. She used to run around a lot when she was little. But honestly, I don't remember much about the details. Jack could feel something was off. No matter how many years had passed, a father wouldn't completely forget his child's early years. There would always be at least one vivid moment, a meaningful phrase, a favorite game. Something that left a mark. Yet this man seemed strangely vague. As if he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Jack offered a gentle smile. But inside his doubts grew stronger. He decided not to push further on this topic, and instead shifted the conversation in another direction. So how did you manage to find Tu Tien? This time, the man's eyes flickered with a hint of caution. He replied slowly, I have an old acquaintance here. They told me about her, so I came looking. Who was this acquaintance? Just someone from the past. I lost touch with them long ago. But they used to work around here. So they knew about her. Jack nodded. But inside his conclusion was already clear. This man was not telling the truth. His answers were too vague, inconsistent, and filled with gaps that made no sense. The more Jack thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. The scattered details his mother had mentioned were like small puzzle pieces, seemingly unrelated at first, but when put together they revealed a bigger picture. And that picture was far more complicated than it appeared. The man who claimed to be Tu Tien's father should have been overwhelmed with joy upon finding his lost daughter after so many years. He should have been eager to bring her home, to share the news with the family immediately, to spend every possible moment making up for lost time. But instead he was calm to calm. He never spoke about his family. Never once mentioned taking Tu Tien back to reunite. When asked, he avoided the topic, gave vague answers, and postponed the conversation, saying that the right time would come. Jack understood one thing clearly. When people find what matters most to them, they don't delay. The way this man behaved was completely inconsistent with the emotions of a real father. Jack couldn't ignore the growing suspicion in his heart. But he also knew he couldn't rush things and risk making a mess of the situation. If this man was hiding something, Jack needed to stay calm and clever to uncover the truth. When Jack suggested they visit the family together the next day, he caught a flicker of hesitation on the man's face. Just a brief pause, a subtle hint of tension. But Jack noticed it. The man quickly composed himself. But his response felt forced. You must be busy with work. Take care of that first. As for visiting my home, there's no rush. Jack met his gaze. A father who had been separated from his daughter for years, finally finding her again, yet he wasn't eager to introduce her to his family. That didn't make sense. Taiwan had asked him the same thing before, and his answer had been, we'll go when the time is right. Jack's mother had also brought it up, but the man only laughed it off, saying let her get used to things first. The excuse repeated itself over and over, like a poorly rehearsed lie. Jack didn't argue. He simply nodded as if accepting the explanation. But inside his doubts only deepened. If this man was truly Tyrion's father, why was he acting this way? The air between them grew tense. Perhaps the man sensed that Jack was testing him. Instead of continuing the conversation, he made an excuse about meeting a friend. Jack frowned slightly. A man who had just arrived in this area, how could he already have a friend to meet? But he said nothing, merely filing away the detail in his mind. If the man wanted to leave, so be it. That meant Jack would have time alone with Tu Tien. A much-needed moment of quiet, after the weight of so many suspicions. As the man disappeared into the night, Jack finally turned to Tu Tien. She was already watching him, her eyes shimmering with emotion. She hadn't expected him to return without warning, and even less so to appear here on this very night. The distance of all those days apart melted away in an instant. She stepped closer as if needing to confirm that he was really standing in front of her. And Jack, though his mind was still full of worries, had only one instinct in that moment: to hold her close. She was still his Tu Tien, with those same eyes, that same smile, that same warmth that made his heart feel at peace. No matter how many doubts remained, no matter how many unanswered questions lingered, there was one thing he was certain of: his love for her. Jack gently pulled her into his arms. The feeling of holding her again after so long made all his exhaustion fade away. No words were needed, no explanations. Just an embrace was enough for them to understand the depth of their longing. Tu Tien rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. He was home. No matter how unclear things still were, no matter what suspicions remained, as long as she was with him, she felt safe. Jack leaned down and placed a soft kiss on her forehead. "I missed you," just 3 simple words. Yet they carried so much meaning. That night under the peaceful sky of the countryside, there was nothing left between them but raw unspoken emotions. Jack gently ran his fingers through Tyrion's hair, savoring this rare moment of peace after so many days apart, yet his mind remained restless, circling back to the same thought. The more he dwelled on it, the more he felt something was off about that man. Tu Tien rested her head on Jack's shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat in the quiet of the late night. His warmth made her feel safe, yet inside conflicting emotions tore at her. She had longed for this moment for years, to finally reunite with the father she had lost since childhood. But why didn't his happiness feel complete? Why was there still unease lingering in her heart? The night passed agonizingly slowly in the small room. Jack and Tu Tien sat beside each other, yet an unspoken worrying lingered between them. Outside, the night breeze drifted through the window, carrying the earthy scent of fresh grass from the vast fields. The distant hum of insects only deepened the silence, like the calm before an impending storm. Jack watched Tu Tien quietly. She leaned against him, but her breaths were uneven, her brows slightly furrowed. He knew she was lost in thought, torn between trust and doubt. She had waited so long for this reunion, had nurtured the dream of seeing her father again through the lonely years of her childhood. But now that the dream had come true, it wasn't bringing her the happiness she had imagined. He understood, and because he understood, he didn't want her to be trapped in an illusion. She needed the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Jack recalled the man's expression. When he first arrived, it wasn't the face of a father, overjoyed to see his daughter happy. Instead, there was hesitation, even weariness. He had avoided questions, skillfully steering conversations away whenever his family was mentioned. All these small details, when pieced together, painted a picture with too many dark shadows. Jack didn't want to jump to conclusions. And he was certain, if that man were truly Tu Tien's father, he wouldn't have acted this way. Beside him, Tu Tien remained silent, processing everything Jack had said earlier. She had ignored the strange details before, and willing to let doubt creep in. She was afraid that if she questioned it, this fragile happiness would shatter. But now, with Jack pointing out the inconsistencies, she could no longer turn a blind eye. When a lost child reunites with their family, what is the first reaction of their loved ones? Overwhelming joy. The urgent need to share the news with everyone. The eagerness to bring them home immediately. But that man wasn't like that. He willingly stayed at the farm, delayed going home, and even avoided talking about his current family. Was it because he truly had no family? Or was it because he didn't want anyone to know? He was here. The thought made her chest tighten. If Jack was right, if this was all a lie, could she bear it? Jack squeezed her hand tighter. A silent reassurance. He knew she was afraid. But the scariest thing wasn't the truth, it was continuing to live in a lie. Tomorrow he would find a way to get her a DNA test. It was the only way to end these doubts. If that man was truly her father, Jack would be the first to apologize for his suspicions. But if he wasn't, he wouldn't let Tu Tien be deceived any longer. Tonight would be long, but the real storm was still ahead. Thank you for listening to today's story. Jack and Tu Tien's journey to uncover the truth is far from over. Is the mysterious man really Tu Tien's biological father? Or is there an even greater secret hidden beneath it all? Stay tuned for the next chapter. And don't forget to follow, so you won't miss the upcoming twists.